very much. Okay, can we get a roll call?
He's arrived.
He has arrived. We have legal.
Commissioner Andrade?
Here.
Commissioner Brown?
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez? Here. Commissioner Quigley?
Here.
Chair Dickerson?
Here. Moving on to the approval of the Planning Commission minutes of September 2nd. If all commissioners have had a chance to read through those, if there are any things that need to be altered by them, please let us know. Otherwise, if I can get a motion.
I'm going to abstain.
I know. Do we not get a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of September 2nd.
August 19th,
Do I hear a second?
2015, as written.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstentions?
I'm going to abstain.
There we go. All right, thank you very much. Public comment period. Each member of the audience may address the commission on any subject within the commission's business. Each member of the audience and each subject is limited to discussions of 3 minutes or as otherwise directed by the chair. This is for items not on the agenda. Does anyone in the audience wish to make any comments of things not on the agenda? Seeing none. We move along to the consent calendar. The consent calendar is approved with one motion. These items are read only on request of commission members. Should anyone, including members of the public, wish to discuss or disapprove any item, it must be dropped from the blanket motion and considered as a separate item. There's a single item on the agenda and it needs to be pulled. We can move on to that and have staff discuss that briefly. Peter?
Yes. In the resolution attached to the report, there are 2 words that need to be changed on the 4th paragraph. 4th paragraph, 3rd line after the comma, that should be removed, and then it should read after the comma, there is certainty that there, not the, there is no possibility the proposed ordinance will have a significant effect on the environment. So with those 2 changes to the wording, staff recommends approval of the resolution.
Okay.
Where is that again? I'm sorry.
It is
It's the 4th paragraph and it's the 3rd line.
removed and these turned into there. Otherwise, the sentence is funky. For legal, is that, that suffices? We can go ahead and make those changes on the fly and vote on it that way? Okay, all right, great. Okay, if anybody has any comments to that, and if not, can we get a motion to approve agenda item number 1?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the consent calendar.
Okay, with the revisions as discussed by staff?
Yes.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
By
Is it a resolution?
Yes.
Oh, well, there we go. I guess since it was taken off of, so if it's taken off of consent, it becomes the resolution as opposed to a motion. All right, so can we get a, can we get a thing? There you go.
That the Planning Commission by resolution recommends City Council approve Z 2015-0002 as Resolution 2664 with the changes as proposed by staff.
Second.
Okay, can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Hernandez?
Aye.
Commissioner Quigley?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Andrade?
Aye.
Chair Dickerson?
Aye. Motion passes. And we will move on to item number 2. Downs Equipment Rentals Plan Development Permit located east side of Presker Lane at Romer Way. Can we hear from staff?
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. The project before you is a plan development permit to facilitate or to allow Downs Equipment Rentals. The project site in Downs Equipment Rentals is that it's a heavy construction equipment and farm equipment rental business. The project site is located on the east side of North Presker Lane, opposite Romer Way. This general vicinity, the project site's about 1.6 acres in size, located in the PDCM, Plan Development Commercial Manufacturing Zoning District. To the north of the project site, the Planning Commission relatively recently approved Santa Maria Tire, so a plan development permit was approved in 2013 for Santa Maria Tire. To the south, the Planning Commission approved a plan development permit for Estrada Produce. So they have been planned, this would be the third plan development permit in that series of 3 lots. Currently, the site is undeveloped. There's no substantial, nothing there is very substantial, scattered weeds and grasses for the most part. Probably the most significant feature on the entire property is on the easterly portion. The easterly portion of the property is traversed by a Santa Barbara County Flood Control District easement. The easement is 50 feet wide and includes a 20-foot wide service road you see on the left there, and a 30-foot wide drainage ditch, again controlled by the Flood Control District. The property looking looking west from Highway 101, so that's the view from Highway 101. Again, the project site does abut Highway 101, and because of that location, this property and the others in that area, the City Council in 1991 adopted an ordinance 91-5, to address future development that might occur on these properties. It was construed or given that these properties are at the northerly gateway to the city, and based on that gateway location, the City Council established certain uses and design parameters for any development that would occur on the properties. This is the project itself. Again, the Downs Equipment Rental Facility. There's a 3,900 square foot building generally centered in the middle of the property. The the building would include the sales office, and the majority of the building would include the service shops. And there's a canopy that would also accommodate inspections and servicing. The bigger area, the kind of the light gray area, is the storage area where the inventory, the leasable equipment, the pieces of equipment would be kept. To the westerly portion there are 10 parking spaces for customers, and a display space is located on the easterly portion next to Highway 101. The building itself, pretty simple. A metal building, reminiscent. It's got some of the characteristics of the Santa Maria Tire that was approved to the north. It was also a metal building. One thing, however, is the color. The color of the building, according to the ordinance 91-5, should be earth tones. So that's one thing that staff has addressed and would recommend that the Planning Commission adopt an amended version of the conditions. So staff did amend the conditions. The standard condition for exterior materials and colors, we added some language, and we just did this recently. We have a handout if that's not visible to you, but literally we would just add some language that would simply state, in accordance with the requirements of City Council Ordinance 91-5, the primary building color shall be earth tones. The final color selection shall incorporate the earth tones to the satisfaction of the zoning administrator. So that would be the one change, and we can elaborate on that a little bit more if needed. I'd like to go back and just touch on one thing. When this was first presented, this was presented to the Planning Commission relatively recently, some time ago. The first version was presented at a conceptual review. At that time, staff believes it's come a long way. At that time, the yard, the area where the leasable inventory was pretty open. So in effect, pretty much all of the inventory, all the pieces of equipment could probably be seen from Highway 101. So the applicant did take a step back, looked at the ordinance and this particular piece of property, improved the building a little bit, but the main thing was there's now a 6-foot-high perimeter wall around the entire perimeter of the property. It's a masonry wall, a 6-foot masonry wall along the 101 frontage, and then a solid wall around the rest of the perimeter. So now the entire storage area is screened. That display space, as you can see, is framed by landscaping, and the applicant took it up a notch, so to speak, excuse me, and installed several trees around the perimeter. So easterly, northerly, and westerly perimeter now has a substantial planting of trees. So staff believes that the site plan has come a long way. Incidentally, one other thing, in the conditions, there is a condition that the equipment stored should be stored in its lowest position and arranged within that display area in such a manner that the visibility is limited to the maximum extent practicable. So not only would the screening be in place, but the equipment would be positioned and stored in such a manner that it shouldn't extend up above the screening. So with those improvements, staff again believes it's come a long way. And the main or only change, I might add, is the discussion we made on the building color. That should be earth tone. And with that condition, staff would recommend the Planning Commission consider approval of the project. The project is exempt under the provisions of CEQA, and I believe that concludes staff's presentation.
Great. Thank you very much. Before we hear from the applicant, do the commissioners have any questions for staff? No. I have one question, and that is the trees themselves. What height are we looking at, and what level of fullness, that sort of thing, are we looking at for the trees on the eastern and northern side, at least at initial planting?
Thank you, Commissioner Dickerson. Excellent question. It was important to us. And we believe substantial. I had a couple of our tree experts, I asked them that question. We could be more precise, but I understand pretty tall is 30 feet.
At initial planting?
No, that's at grow out. We're talking about 24-inch box trees. So initially, no, it had the 6-foot wall and the typical trees that you would see at a planting. They would be the most substantial we could get is at 24-inch box. But what's typical of an initial planting?
So those are probably 10 to 12 feet tall.
Something like that at planting.
Maybe a little less if you look at the trees at the theater, around the theater, that were just planted recently. Those were 24-inch box trees.
Okay.
And I think those are in the ballpark of 8 feet.
Yeah. And general growth is such that you're probably looking 5, 10, 15 years before they reach the 20 to 20-plus foot range. Okay.
And we would add, we expect the applicant to take very good care of them, maintain them, water them, and all, so they do grow well and grow shapely as well. Yes.
Okay.
I do have a question. I noticed that the second paragraph, page 2, you guys mentioned that there is a 15% minimum landscaping requirements, and that was met. So was that what they met, the minimum?
They did meet the minimum. They met the 15, and they put the emphasis on the trees. That's correct.
Okay. And I did see that the land immediately adjacent to the freeway is controlled by the flood control district, which is why you guys weren't unable to request more. Am I?
Absolutely correct. It's kind of a long story, but we've wrangled with the flood control district for a long time, and they have their own stringent rules or policies, and they just don't want anything in their easement. We've tried to even do ground cover, and they're their own entity when it comes to getting landscaping. It's unfortunate because we would really like to.
Yeah, and so along those lines, going back to one of the photos shown earlier, the channel and the dirt,
The access
path, that unfortunately is going to stay. The attractive landscaping that the applicant is going to do is going to be on the other side of that. So as you drive down the freeway, you will see this area that does not look improved, and then you'll see the development. And that's true of all the projects on this stretch.
Okay.
further questions of staff? No? Can we hear from, oh, we got one more.
Originally, when we talked about this in the study session, didn't we have a centerpiece, piece of construction right there in front? Wasn't, that never happened?
Are you talking about?
The wall?
Are you talking about this?
The wall?
I thought there was gonna be a big machine there on
Yeah,
the
it
third
is.
position.
It's right
Right.
here.
It's right there. Yeah, so there will be,
But that'll be, obviously, you can see that from the freeway, though.
that's correct. As far as I understand, is that the case, they'll be allowed one large piece of equipment or,
As display.
Yes, Mr. Chair, as we discussed, that is the one display space, if you could see the black, I don't have a pointer, but it's framed by trees, but that is the display space that they would show off, so to speak, one of their pieces of equipment. And again, it's been stringently conditioned that, and I think they would want to do that. Obviously, whatever's on display there better look good, and the framing around it, the landscaping should look good. So it kind of showpieces the display as opposed to just kind of a hodgepodge kind of a thing. It's really been designed to be appropriate. So yes, that is the display space.
okay, further questions? If we can hear from the applicant. If you can state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Dan Blau, 2353 A Street, Santa Maria. I don't have a lot to say here this morning, this evening. Bill has done a real good job of working with us to make this project approvable. I will tell you that the Downs equipment is a little bit disappointed not having their blue color. But we'll work that issue out. You can't die on that sword. Yes, you're right. They do want to have one display equipment in the front. Of course, they're going to put their nicest piece of equipment out there, their newest one, because they're trying to let the world know who they are and what they do. So that's kind of simple. But I think they're pretty anxious to go forward with the project, and so unless you have any questions, I'm ready to sit down and let you guys vote.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Will you guys be selling the equipment on the site?
No, they're basically a wholesale operation.
Okay.
And what they do is they actually rent other rental companies. For example, I doubt that you'll see a customer per day in that location. Now, across the street from them is the other rental yard. They will rent from them. I mean, if people call up and say, I need a big piece of equipment for one of my customers, and they'll do that. But it's almost all their equipment is delivered in their trucks to a site or to another rental company. It's not customer driven by other people that come there. In fact, the current plans I have don't even show an office in the building. There's a bathroom for the employees and there's a workstation. I mean, they almost have no customer area to come to. It's not what
Okay.
they do.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure that, because you have a piece of equipment, which is a form of advertisement, so I don't know if people
Well, the idea
will-
is they're buying a piece of property and paying for it because it's on the freeway. I mean, there's 85,000 cars a day there that drive by the place. They want people to know that if you're a farmer or you're a heavy equipment operator, you can call Downs Rental and they will deliver a piece of equipment of that size and nature to your site. So sure, we didn't want to do what Quinn does. I think that's pretty damn ugly, I agree. But we still want people to know that we're in business here in Santa Maria and call us, we'll deliver you a piece of equipment.
Okay. And I do have a comment. I think you took my comments seriously, and staff worked with you, so I think you really did a great job getting this project to where it's at.
We tried.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any further questions from the applicant? No? Okay. So we will go ahead and, is there any written communication? No? All right. So we'll go ahead and bring it back to the commission. Are there further comments or questions by commissioners? Or can we get a motion?
I have one question.
Yes,
The project on the green sheets, the exterior materials and colors, on page 6 on the green sheets, item number 6, it doesn't talk about the earth tone colors that you've mentioned, and so I was concerned that that somehow that's going to be wiggling away from the requirement of the ordinance. And so,
On that topic, what was mentioned in the presentation was that the recommendation is to take the language on the screen to replace what's in condition number 6.
okay. In paragraph number 6.
Mr. Chair, I could go as far as to say it's already in the final version. This is the language we put in the permit, so this is the one that will go to the applicant, if you accept it and approve it.
You talk, okay,
They've also got a hard copy.
all right. We don't have a hard copy? It's okay. Thank you, that's all I had.
I know.
Okay, are there any further questions of staff? No? Okay. Do we hear a,
Do you want a motion?
do we hear a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve Downs Equipment Rental Plan Development Permit located east side of Presker Lane at Romer Way, subject to any changes by staff.
I'll second that if by that you mean
Right.
modify paragraph number 6 on page 6 of the green sheets to
That's what I
include
mean.
the provision that we've been provided here so that it reflects earth tones and the like.
Not hearing.
I'd second that then.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. Best of luck to you guys.
Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Blau.
Good luck.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 3, the Lazy Days Boarding House Plan Development Permit and Development Agreement at 1300-1324 North Broadway. I believe staff wants to do something with this, pull it, is that right?
Yes. At the request of the applicant, we are recommending that we not hear the item. And instead of continuing, we are recommending that we actually pull it off the agenda. And when it is ready, we will renotice and have it on the agenda.
I'll move that we remove it from the agenda, item number 3.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? It's off.
Lazy days. Lazy days
Okay.
of summer.
Item number 4, Verizon Mono Tree Plan Development Permit at 1611 South Blosser Road. Can we hear from staff?
Good evening, Commissioners. The next project before you this evening is a plan development permit to construct a 55-foot mono-eucalyptus tree at the existing Arco gas station located on the southwest corner of Battles and Blosser Road. The existing project site is surrounded by residential uses. To the west, there is the Westgate Single Family Residential Subdivision. Directly south of the project site is the Sienna Apartments that were newly constructed and just finished a couple months ago. This aerial is a bit dated, and so it doesn't show the constructed apartment complex and the full build-out of Westgate. But both those sites have been
Sorry.
fully built
I
out
read it.
to date. To the north, it is still vacant land, but there are development plans to construct multi-story senior housing as well as neighborhoods serving commercial uses. And to the west is, I apologize, to the east is another apartment complex. The applicant is proposing to construct a 55-foot mono eucalyptus shown by the red dot on the site plan. This is what the existing site looks like. Where the arrow is pointing is where the proposed mono eucalyptus tree will be located. And this is directly from the parking lot of the Arco gas station looking to the south. Here's a picture of where the mono-eucalyptus will be seen viewing from Blosser Road, and that is the car wash that would be adjacent to it. This is from the multi-purpose trail that runs between the proposed, the existing Arco gas station and the Westgate single-family residential subdivision. This multi-purpose trail runs right in between it, and it's a pedestrian and bike connection through the neighborhood. And again, this is from the multi-purpose trail. You can see on the right side of the picture, that's the newly constructed Sienna Apartments, and then to the left is the proposed mono-eucalyptus next to the car wash.
Is that red arrow you were showing us?
Yes.
Okay.
Here's a blow-up of the site plan. As you can see from this aerial, the distance arrows that are shown in black that show the proximity of the proposed mono-eucalyptus to the other structures surrounding it, that's about 100 feet distance between those arrows. So this mono-eucalyptus will be in direct view and in direct proximity to existing residential uses. It's 55 feet tall, and right now all the other structures on site are about between 20 to 25 feet in height. Sienna Apartments directly to the south, the highest point of their building is about 24 feet. The residential to the west are mainly 1 and 2 stories, so they range from a height about 17 feet to about 22 feet. So this structure that's being proposed will be the largest structure of its size in any radius proximity to it. It'll be about twice the height of anything else. And so there will be direct views on site and on the adjacent residential neighborhood that will see this mono-eucalyptus. There are no existing site trees or street trees in the subdivision around it or along the streets or on site that are anywhere near the height of the proposed structure. The existing trees on site are approximately 20 feet high right now and won't mature any more than probably 30 feet. Same with the street trees along Blosser and Battles Road. Staff believes because of the proximity of the proposed mono-eucalyptus to the adjoining residents and the fact that there's no other structures or trees or building of its size on site or surrounding it, that there would be significant visual impacts that this structure would pose on the adjacent residential neighborhood and even users of the existing Arco gas station. Staff has recommended that the applicant explore other alternatives besides just locating a mono-eucalyptus. They have explored the idea of some sites, some industrial sites to the north, Hayward Lumber, as well as Titan Foods. The property owners there were not in favor of having telecommunications equipment on their site. However, staff does believe there are additional alternatives such as an ODAS, an outdoor distributed antenna system that could be explored that would go on adjacent utility poles or light poles in the area, and they would be smaller pieces of equipment, but much more of them that could be distributed in that area that would have less of a visual impact on the site and the surrounding neighborhood, but would accomplish the same purpose. So staff is recommending denial of this application for a mono-eucalyptus tree and recommending that alternatives be explored in this area based on significant visual impacts to the site and the surrounding residential neighborhood that would be imposed by the 55-foot structure. That concludes, before I conclude, we did hand out a letter that we did receive from the Tobes Group. The Tobes Group are the property owners of the Sienna Apartments to the south, as well as Westgate and Lavinia to the west. And Michael Tobes, who wrote this letter, does support staff's decision to deny the application and does cite that there would be significant visual impacts to his projects and the residents and community in the surrounding area. Now that concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for questions should you have them, and the applicant is here and available for questions as well.
Before we hear from the applicant, do the commissioners have any questions for staff?
I do. Well, visual impact is very important. What is the need? What is the cell coverage in this area? Do you guys know that? Or is that a question for the applicant?
That would be a better question for them.
Further questions? I have a question. The ODASs, they could meet whatever needs that a monopine or a monoeucalyptus has. Basically, it's a different technology, but it's one that we haven't typically explored in the city. But if the need was there for fulfilling the capacity, that they're asking for, that could be accomplished through ODASs, is that correct?
That is correct. What the monoeucalyptus does, it has several, in this case, it would have 12 large antennas. And what an ODAS system does, instead of having large antennas, it has smaller antennas that are put in the general area, but much more of them. And the little antennas then pick up the need and the coverage that would be done by those larger antennas, but it basically does the same purpose, more of them, but smaller scale.
And I think I showed in study session, those are basically small gray boxes that are attached to light posts, so.
Correct.
Pretty innocuous.
Light posts, utility posts, they're small, they blend in with them. We have not done them in the city yet, but we have had discussions with Public Works, and they are open to the idea of exploring the need for that, seeing as that coverage in residential areas is becoming more popular.
Okay. Any further questions? No? Can we hear from the applicant? Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Chair Dickerson, Jay Higgins, representing Verizon Wireless. I apologize, I'm going to have to read some of this. Wouldn't ordinarily get into this level of detail, but we don't ordinarily have recommendations for denial going into a planning commission hearing. So, as you know, Verizon, and by the way, you can stop me anytime if you have any questions. There's a lot of technology out there, and I can answer some of it. Some of it's over my head, though, so I may have to come back for some questions if you have them.
Thank you.
As you know, Verizon Wireless has installed quite a few cell towers and facilities in the city limits. More so recently as they react to a huge demand for services, particularly wireless broadband or data services. Today it's estimated that about 40% of households are wireless only. And we all know the benefits of wireless phones over traditional landlines. It's like having a mini computer in your hand. You've got now 4 or 5 of these devices per household, and whereas compared to what used to be effectively a two-way radio mounted to your wall for your entire family to share. So you have quantity of use of devices out there, and you've got the what's also being attempted to be fit through the pipes, the wireless data that's out there. People sharing videos, sharing files, social media, using maps to look for services in their area or do street views on Google or whatever it is. It's a huge amount of data. It's gigabytes per minute that was never out there or transmitted previously. So the demand is there. It's well justified, and we've submitted some information to staff that also justifies the demand for the service and the need for the cell site at this particular location. But that's just the individual user. You ought not forget about the commercial businesses or other utilities that are using broadband services, commercial broadband services like Verizon, to deploy their fleets, track packages, or monitor gas or electric use in people's homes. And finally, your own emergency service agencies all use commercial broadband. In this county, it's likely Verizon Wireless to respond to emergencies. First responders use life packs that can transmit a patient's vital signs directly to an ER. Dispatchers can deploy and track safety personnel in and out of emergency situations while monitoring their fleet's progress to an incident, and also advise on how quickly they will respond because the technology is timed to real-time traffic patterns. So you can have a dispatcher say, yes, that particular incident will be responded to by X, Y, and Z agencies, ambulance, fire, sheriff, whatever have you, CHP, and here's how long it's going to take them to get there. So that's what emergency services providers use Verizon Wireless Network for today. And it's not just a CB radio. We have a lot of meetings with county OES, Office of Emergency Services, about where the weak spots are in the Verizon Wireless Network. And they say to us, gone are the days of the CB radio. Our vision of nirvana in the dispatch center is voiceless transmittal of information. They all do it with tablets and handhelds, and they track when people enter and get out of incidents. And in particular, with the ambulance drivers, they're on contract to respond in a certain amount of time. And if they can't log on to the network because there's too many people using the network, nobody knows where they are, when they're coming in or when they're coming out. So I think we all really understand the need for this services, at least I hope we do. But sometimes we find ourselves explaining this need for a site in the context of exactly where it needs to go. So the search ring, we provided staff. If staff has it, I'd love to see it up on the screen. It's a major component of why we're locating here. And if you don't have it, I do have a handout. Let me just the first sheet. Yeah, you can tear that up. So the placement of cell sites, and stop me if you've heard this before. The placement of cell sites, the best analogy I've really seen is it's sprinklers on a lawn. You have to place the new cell site equidistant away from where the other cell sites are in your network so you don't create interference. So what the map shows is we've got a ring in an area where there aren't any cell sites. Now that's where the engineer says we need to go somewhere in this ring, and we've actually located ideally right in the center of the ring on the gas station. The most important aspect of locating a cell site these days is not necessarily being equidistant away from the other cell sites. It's a combination of that plus being near where the customer demand is. And a third parameter is really offloading other cells that are providing services in a particular area. So we've got a three-pronged engineering approach to locate cells. It's got to be equidistant away from others, it's got to be near where the demand is, and it's got to be able to offload the other cells in the area where there are degrading data services. In other words, when you pick up your phone and you see you have bars and you can't dial out, or you can't get a signal. There's service out there, but you can't get on it because everybody else is on it. So that's the capacity issue that we're trying to solve here. So gone are the days are cell sites serving just arterials or highways. We are in neighborhoods providing this service because that's where the demand is. It is, and in this particular location, you've got your specific plan area that was created before cell sites were contemplated, likely. You've got essentially a sea of residential uses. A lot of new developments these days, I expect that these have underground utilities. There was no discussion in your planning documents about where to locate cell sites and provide that service because it didn't really exist. But what we try to do when we locate these sites is look for institutional or commercial properties or industrial. And in this particular case, we have a commercial property that's slightly underutilized, and it is right in the middle of our search ring, and also ideally right where all the demand is coming from. So the other information that I provided to staff that was excluded from the staff report in the presentation is the statement from our RF engineer about why this site is needed here. And this is from Dwayne Bonham. It's in the record. I'll also hand it in again. I'm just going to have to read it. Mr. Bonham says, I have a repeater analysis that we originally ran last year on the Betaravia and South Broadway cell site. That's the cell site that's on the map, on the search ring map, to the southeast. The Broadway cell site has progressed to severe overload due to continued usage growth. And this is engineering speak, bear with me. Our best method for determining the type of usage that causes, so in other words, what he's saying is that cell site down there, the southeast corner of the city, is not performing. It's jammed up, clogs, it doesn't perform well because of all of the users on that site. Our best method for determining the type of usage that causes this overload is when it occurs during the day. 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. is indicative of business use. Noon to 3 p.m. spikes would be school traffic, and 6 to 10 p.m. is residential. For the Betteravia and South Broadway site, I am showing consistent busy periods in the 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. period, indicating we have a target residential capacity, that we have to target residential capacity in order to solve the degradation. I'm almost done. We have a vast area of residential homes with a population greater that can be handled by a distant cell site. So what's happening now is all of the households in this particular neighborhood are being served by a cell site that's too far away to cover it. Again, with new construction in the area potentially adding more traffic to the network, I'm expecting to see performance in the area covered by Betteravia and South Broadway to degrade to the point where emergency service or fire and ambulance are not usable during the noon to 10 p.m. period within 12 months. And this was dated in June, and we've got some graphics that display what he's trying to explain in a narrative fashion. I'm going to try to wrap up. So back to our site location. You've probably heard this before, but we need to locate a site. We need to locate a facility where there's available height, and we like to do that by architecturally integrating into a building that doesn't have any buildings around it. But we don't have that option here because this roof line is challenging, and there's no room on the top of the building for us to put our equipment. We also have to have a property owner that's willing to sign a lease with us. It's got to be a long-term lease, minimum 20 years. And the reason for the long-term nature of the lease is Verizon puts all that infrastructure on the ground. It costs a lot of money. They have to amortize that over a certain amount of time. But more importantly is that once you put a cell site in the ground, it starts to interact with the people around it. It starts to interact with the cell sites around it. And you can't just rip it out after 5 years. Otherwise, you got to do it all over again and then retweak your process and your engineering to make the network work. The process that we go through to land on a property, to negotiate a contract, to come through the permit process takes 3 years, minimum. So it's a big deal for us to come before you tonight with an application to put up a cell tower. It precedes us 3 years of engineering and real estate negotiations and legal work to get to this point. The other constraints that are somewhat obvious: we need to connect to utilities. We need a property that has available power and telephone service to it, so the site can connect into the telephone network. So because we can't integrate into the architecture of this particular building, and I'm going to get into the alternative sites that staff wanted us to look at too, we just simply have to propose a tower. Not something that we ordinarily would do in a residential area. However, because we have no choice, we got to get the antennas up in the air over everything else around them. It's a line of sight technology. And because the industry has come out with very realistic looking false trees, we felt as though this is a project that could be supported by staff and ought to be supported by the Planning Commission because of how the false trees have evolved over the last few years. I also I'm a little disappointed I don't see the photo simulations that we provided staff that show the before and after pictures of what the false tree will look like. I've also provided staff with photos of existing false trees, and I don't see those in the presentation either, but I can give those to you now. These are just, if you pass them around, these are not photo simulations, these are photos of actual yew trees in the Tri-County area, and in the back there's a false pine tree. Okay, great. So if you've seen those, then perhaps you can agree with me that the examples of what we're trying to put up don't constitute a significant visual impact in the least. If we were coming to you to plant a 45-foot tree and it was real, I don't suppose that you would consider that to be a significant visual impact. There's some discussion in the staff report as to the impact that the facility will have on people at the gas station to see the conduit and cables, but that's not a public view, and we don't consider that a visual impact. We certainly don't consider the quality of the product that we're putting out there to disguise the antennas and the tree trunks to be a significant visual impact. However, the lack of mature landscaping on the property does make it, I think, a little bit of a challenge. I'm not totally trying to whitewash this thing. I'm not an industry biased guy. It is a tree that sticks out in the middle of nowhere, but the question is, what are our choices? We can try to plant some other trees around it so it softens the view. It's not just one tree out in the middle of nowhere, and we've tried to do that with the simulations that we provided to staff. There is a strip of area along the western property there that could offer that. Taking into account, we are 250 feet away from the public streets in either direction there, Blosser and Battles. So it's not as if a looming 55-foot structure is that close to your public views. It's muted by the surrounding buildings. It's muted by the gas station structure that's in front of it. And keep in mind, when staff says this is a 55-foot tall structure, it's a little bit of a stretch to say it's a 55-foot tall structure. When the antennas are at the 45-foot level, and we dress up the top 7 to 10 feet above the antennas with tree branches. So you get your head around the fact that it's, yes, technically we're at 55 feet, but we're talking about tree branches. The 45-foot elevation of the antennas is required from an engineering standpoint to do its job. The signal pattern of the antennas goes out over the horizon, but it's got a little bit of an angle to it. So it travels like this as it comes away from the location of the transmitting. If you've got a building out in front of that signal, it's going to create a shadow beyond it. So there's buildings surrounding the property. They're at the 26-foot level. The bottom of our antenna is 42 feet. We think that, could we lower the antennas 3 or 4 feet and still make it work? Sure. Could we lower it 10 feet? Well, if we lowered it, we'd start to create shadows over the buildings that we're trying to cover to get to the very edge of the cell site, the customer base out there. So that would necessitate another cell tower somewhere else. We're trying to be efficient with these facilities. We put a lot of them out there, but we don't want to have to take one, and this I'm going to get into the DAS question in a second here. If we mute the effectiveness of the cell site by lowering the height, we got to put up more. So with regard to DAS nodes or locating on utility poles, it typically the infrastructure that can fit on a utility pole is substantially less than what we put on a cell tower. So we put 9 to 12 big antennas on a cell tower, make it look like a tree, have all kinds of equipment inside that car wash building. We can put about 1/10 of that equipment on a utility pole or a light standard. Consequently, if we were to not build this cell tower, we'd have to come up with about 6 to 8 other facilities, small cells or DAS nodes, to replace the effectiveness or the carrying capacity of that macro site. There may be a 1 or 2 utility poles, brown utility poles that run up and down Blosser that we could use. I don't know how long those utility poles are scheduled to be above ground. I don't know to what degree, how tall we can operate off those utility poles. But I certainly know that having staff suggest DAS nodes or small cells to replace a macro cell is like asking somebody that's coming in for a single-family home on their property and telling them that they can't locate there. They've got to go look at some other apartments to live in and split up your family. Perhaps a bad analogy, but it's just a different project. There's apples and oranges. We're asking for a project on this particular property. Staff is saying, no, go spread it out. What other industry out there is like that, that's treated at the local level with regulatory scrutiny that says, we don't like it here, we'd like you to turn it inside out and make it something different? That's a very tough one to swallow. Not impossible, but it will result in more than just the cell site we're proposing. The alternative sites that staff questioned our level of analysis of in the staff report and is referenced in Mr. Tope's letter, I think is disingenuous. We took all of the parcels, we took the search ring, placed it on a parcel map. All of the parcels that came up in the search ring specifically said they didn't return our calls, multiple calls, to do a deal or they said no thank you. So the notion that we could possibly locate on the future, maybe senior housing projects sometime in the future from the very developer that's opposing us, I think is a stretch. It simply comes down to there are no parcels inside our search ring that will lease to us on a long-term basis. They have good reasons. The folks that operate the freezer, the parcels that have the food businesses on them, excuse me, I'm stumbling with what they do. Titan, thank you. They have long-term plans to redevelop that property, and they don't want to have a cell site that prevents them from being as flexible as they want to in the future. It's a long-term contract, so I don't particularly blame them. I wish they would have said yes. We always look to take the path of least resistance. I don't like coming here to say that we're going to go against staff. That's unusual. And if staff says, how about this other parcel? I had a personal conversation with somebody in the planning department, said, why don't you go do a better job in contacting these property owners?
That was going to be my question. Have you contacted Mr. Tobes?
Well, no. To be honest, I have not contacted Mr. Tobes. But I cannot envision a scenario where the very opponent of our project on the neighboring parcel would support us across the street. I think that's impractical and highly unlikely. Plus the fact that that particular project is slated to be built when, we don't know. This is a project now. We have a real situation where the service is degrading now. We cannot be speculating on a maybe, which is frankly going to be a no from Mr. Tobes to locate on the senior housing project. I just can't see it happening. So the project before you has been vetted. The alternative properties have been analyzed. We cannot speculate on what somebody else might or might not do. The decision is yours. I certainly can answer any questions you might have.
I have another question.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Yeah, let's go ahead and bring it back to us for questions. Go ahead.
The coverage area, what are the zones that are not being covered, or what is the need? I know there's lots of wants because we're a data-spoiled society, honestly, but what are the needs? If we get down to it, what are the spots that are not being serviced for emergency vehicles?
Sure. It's a little bit of a new animal these days because it used to be a lot easier to explain where your phone doesn't work. You could do a drive test on the roads or just look at your phone and say, no signals, no bars. And that's a tool that's used quite frequently these days still when cell sites are going into Sisquoc or Gary or out there where there is no service. You go anywhere out in this particular area and your phone's going to show bars. So there's service that can be used. It's when will it be available if I need it, if everybody else is operating on the network. And so the footprint.
So am I understanding correctly that there is no area, it's just the time?
I can show you graphically the area. We provided this to staff.
Okay.
In Netta, this area in white is the center of the where the analysis tool is performing that. So it's probably a mile and a half
That is
to
not
2
being,
miles.
there is no coverage.
There is coverage. There's data capacity problems. So you may have the ability to use your phone in the daytime or in the middle of the night, but when everybody's operating on that particular set of channels, it could cause a slowdown and it may not work. And that is what we've substantiated in the record from our RF engineer that's saying within a year, that area will have service degradation to the point that the cell phones won't work.
Well, I guess my concern is if there is an earthquake and something or emergency happens, is there that delay with getting emergency vehicles there because of that 1 mile area?
Yes, absolutely 100%. That is the problem. And I might add the other component to why the small cells or the DAS nodes are not as desirable from the carrier standpoint is that they don't come with backup generators. Little tiny bits of equipment, they get bolted to the pole. It's just the radios and some computers and maybe a 1-hour battery. If you have what we call a macro site that's got a lot of equipment, this particular project comes with a generator too. It's got 8 hours of standby diesel in that generator, and that's what kicks in a power outage. So the cell site, people will be able to use their phones in an emergency there.
Okay. Question?
Yes.
Didn't you show a picture, I think it was the first one, of the site with the tree put in there?
That staff did not, but I have those.
Do you have?
And I'm being told, and I apologize, I forgot that some of these exhibits were shown at the study sessions, but I have a handout if you want to.
If I may,
Oh, I'm sorry, you do have it.
here's a picture of that. The reason that we didn't show them is because this photo simulation shows another eucalyptus tree next to it. It's not an accurate depiction. There isn't another eucalyptus tree next to it, nor do the plans that have been submitted by the applicant propose another eucalyptus. And certainly in installation, it wouldn't be of this size. So we didn't feel that it was an accurate depiction. It was a false representation of what
So
it would
there's
look
only
like.
one of those three.
Right now, there's nothing.
I mean, if that's what would be, though, would be just
Just
one
one.
of the three, and it would be the one closest to the building?
It would be the one on the left,
The taller one.
that
the
what you
taller
said?
one with the red dot on it.
Yeah.
That tree next to it, that red one, does not exist.
Just to Commissioner Brown's question, we socialized this with staff when they had broadcast to us they were going to deny the project because it was of the stark nature of the facility, which I personally, I don't have a problem with that feedback. I think it's accurate. And so we tried to, soften the view by adding a step-up tree. They didn't support that, so we didn't really bother with making that change in the plans because we've been walking into this position with staff pretty much ever since we submitted the project. But yes, the tree with the red dot on it would be the eucalyptus tree, and we have no problem planting other trees on the property, mature trees. Will they come in off the trailer at 30 feet? Probably not. Will they grow to that height over time? Sure. There's other views too, and just to make sure I'm trying to be as objective as possible here. The view from the back side of that property in the development shows it perhaps more starkly. But then the third view, showing it the view as it exists from Blosser, from the south of the property, is a good shot because it shows the distance that the tree peaks over the top of the canopy.
So is it an option to get you to plant other trees that would, I know that's not part of what you're presenting, but
Commissioner Hernandez, we absolutely could be conditioned to plant more trees. I will, just to make sure what we're talking about here, and if that's a good illustration of what the challenge is, we can plant trees along the western boundary to some degree. The southerly property line that goes east-west, that's challenging because there's no room. But if you look at the photo simulation from that view, from south of the property along Blosser, I don't believe it's a significant visual impact without other trees in the foreground. There's some room to plant some trees in the front of the property, and we certainly are flexible and can do that if you so desire.
Other questions? I guess I have a question of staff, but while you're still there, and that is that when we, a while back when we, the commission agreed to the new tower over on the police station, it was my impression that that was going to be the de facto tower used to coordinate all of their their various emergency situations, even stretching well beyond our city limits. Does that interact with this at all in terms of they're not getting coverage, but they've got new coverage through new technology, through what we've already approved?
We aren't able to answer that. We don't have that information. My understanding is that the towers that the police department explored will make sure that the emergency services are able to communicate with the police station and other emergency spots, throughout the city. I mean, that's something, we can look into. If I may, I'd like to make a couple comments.
Sure.
He's not done.
Do you have questions?
Maybe we need to finish with.
Well, I thought he could interact, but that's fine. Let's go ahead. Are you, are there any, first one, are there any other questions?
I just wanted to add that I want to emphasize the fact that we don't take this lightly. We do try to work with staff and anybody for that matter that comes forward and says, how about here? How about there? We have no problems analyzing that. It's a tough one to swallow to be here with a denial. The findings we don't think are adequate. They talk about proximity to residential, they talk about height limits, they talk about this particular tree's height in relation to height limits and other buildings around it. The city's certainly approved trees much taller than this in much more densely populated residential areas by Verizon Wireless, in fact, near schools and in public parks that are abutting residential. So we certainly hope for your support. If you have questions or feel the need to continue us, to bring us back with more information, we have no problem with that. But if we do end up with a denial here today, I've been instructed to file an appeal, and then it's off to the races in a different track. So I can answer any questions you have or come back another time with more information. So.
Okay, thank you. Further questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I do. Would you be able to come up with something showing some other trees around it and so forth to hide this a little bit by maybe the next meeting?
We certainly, Commissioner Brown could certainly come back with better views of what landscaping that could work on the property. The view that staff showed is probably, I'm going to say, 85% effort. Not for lack of trying, but it's the site that does pose some challenges with where we could locate trees. So I would certainly come back and give it another shot. I don't want to set the bar too high, though, in your mind, that we could fully screen or shield the majority of the tree.
Well,
The view from Blosser is difficult. The view from Battles is much easier, sure.
I have a comment, not so much a question. I think that there's a lot of different factors that I think staff cannot address all at once, and I think that I still need more information about emergency services, et cetera, to be able to make that decision, in my view.
All right. Are there any more questions of the applicant? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Quigley.
Yes, I have one more. The options that staff presented, the little black boxes on all the poles, are you against that because of cost or because for some technical reason?
Commissioner Quigley, no, we're not inherently opposed to doing these networks or these style of project sites because we've done them in the past. I don't think it's going to provide the same amount of coverage, and it's not going to be the best solution for this neighborhood because you don't have a lot of above-ground utility poles or light standards, not to mention the quantity. So we go from into the frying pan into the fire, right? Sometimes in neighborhoods where we say we want this one thing here, and they say we'll come back with 6 or 8 other ones, and now we've got 6 or 8 other sets of neighborhood challenges to solve with people that may not want them as close to their homes. The utility poles are, when they are there, or light standards are really close to people's homes, inherently, right? They're on the sidewalk. So where do you put the equipment? It's inherently lower. The utility poles that are out there are 25, 30 feet high. Blosser's got taller, but we have to remember Blosser is only one path, and it's not going to provide the the substantial coverage east and west of Blosser. So we'll have to have more of these. They'll be lower in height, closer to people's homes, no emergency backup power. They're not as ideal.
Further questions? No? All right, thank you very much, Mr. Higgins. I'll go ahead and bring it back to the commission. Actually, first, is there any written communications or public comments? No? Okay. Then we'll go ahead and bring it back to, other than the written communication by Mr. Tobes that's in the you don't
record.
have it? You do now. There you are. Okay, bringing it back to the commission. Do we have any comments? Let's start off with Commissioner Brown.
Yeah, I'd like to see us give them a chance to do something with this rather than just say no and go on. Maybe you can come up with something else to present at another meeting, and hopefully we can work something out with them.
Okay. Commissioner Andrade?
I'm hearing that there's no area to plant trees. They require space. And from what I hear from staff is that that's not a viable option. That's not a viable option to screen the visual effects of this project. Then maybe this is not the right place. Mr. Tobes' letter talks about his financial investments in this area, and he owns a number of properties there that are going to be impacted. And that's, we as the Planning Commission have to make certain findings, one of which is that it's not going to have a negative impact on the surrounding area. I don't know if we can make that finding given the way this project has been presented, and at 55 feet in height or 45 feet in height, still a lot larger than all the other surrounding areas. And so I'll listen to the other commissioners, but my sense is that you're asking for something that they can't do, and it's not viable, and it's just dragging this matter out.
Thank you. Commissioner Hernandez.
I didn't hear that this option wasn't viable. I guess I didn't see that all the options were explored. And that's where my questions arose, especially with the need if there is an emergency. That's my main concern, not just data surfing that, the residential, the homes in this area, but I'm talking about if there is an emergency, do we have coverage in that area? That's my main concern.
Commissioner Quigley.
No, I kind of agree. There's no other option apparently other than no or yes. I don't,
Well, we can also continue it
Right.
to another session. I mean, so that is an additional element.
well, is there any viable option if we continue it? That's what we're looking for.
That's my question.
I have another question.
Yes.
Is your company the one that has the other antenna out here on the northwest side of town?
Commissioner Brown, could you be more specific with the location?
What's that?
What's the location
It's in the northwest part of town over here.
in a park?
Yes.
Russell Park?
What's one?
Well, we have two recently approved towers in public parks in the city, one at Russell Park and one at Oakley Park.
Yeah.
So it's south of Main, off of Church, maybe 2 blocks east of Blosser.
Awesome. Yeah. So what's the height of that?
It's a pine tree, I believe that's 75 feet tall. Antennas are probably at the 67-foot level with the additional brush over the top for the total height of 75.
Doesn't really look that bad.
Right, I've driven by that.
Or that good. Was that it for your comments,
Yes,
Commissioner Quigley? I guess I side with Commissioner Andrade on this. I support staff's position. I don't think aesthetically it looks good for the community. I think that we may be getting to a point where we should probably, maybe through staff and and applicants start looking through at what new technologies are available other than these trees. But that's something for another day. As it stands, I don't think by extending it out and having a new picture with a few additional trees wrapped around the monouke, that we would really see any substantive difference. And as we saw with the previous agenda item this evening, we can get a picture of what a tree is going to look like in 2, 3, 4 decades, but the reality of what's going to be planted today is an entirely different animal, and what can be planted per what staff and even the applicant has admitted to. So I'm not sure that just planting a few extra trees around this thing is really going to do it. Plus, it does impact, as Mr. Tobes wrote in his letter. I mean, he has put the money down. He has built the projects. He wants to build more projects, and he thinks that it's a detriment to that. So that's my position on it. With that, there are a couple, 3 ways we can either. Yes. Oh, we have staff.
If I can make a couple comments. Typically, as the commission stated and as the applicant stated, we don't come forward with a recommendation to deny an application. For a variety of reasons, alternatives that staff preferred being studied didn't end up being studied. The applicant has suggested a willingness to look at other options, and while I agreed there may not be room to actually plant trees that will grow anywhere near the size of the proposed tower, there may still be options to work out, and I just believe those conversations haven't happened. But it could be that upon hearing the position of the commission, the applicant's more willing to explore a wider range of options, and we are willing to do that as well, if the applicant is willing. And so, if there were to be an alternative to the denial recommendation, it would be to ask the applicant if they're willing to seriously look at other options and show that they don't work. We may find out that every other option, including the ODES, has this flaw. We don't know that now. And thus, it's a piece of information that you can't know for certain in order to make a decision on. So if the applicant's willing, I would recommend to the commission that we do continue the item, not to any particular date because we don't know how long it's going to need. But if the applicant is willing, we work through that and then we can come back. If the commission ends up agreeing that this needs to be denied, then you can take that action at that point. The applicant has stated they will appeal and move through the process. But if we are able to find something, then we could avoid the appeal process and so on.
And I do know that in the packet there is no option to approve it. I mean, we didn't receive, I mean, we have we have the resolution for denial, but we don't have a resolution for acceptance.
Yeah, in this particular case, because of the discussions between staff and the applicant, that it seemed like they wanted to come forward and see what the commission was going to say. We did a CEQA exemption based on the fact that we were recommending its denial. So that let us skip all CEQA and just move straight forward. So there is not an option to approve it, but you can continue it or you can take the action to deny it.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to make a motion that we continue this item to a future date until staff and applicant has had the opportunity to look at all the other options and come to the planning commission with a big picture as to whether approve or deny the project.
Can I, point of order, can we continue something to a date that doesn't exist? Or sometime in the future?
It exists.
Maybe. No, it doesn't.
Commissioner Dickinson, Commissioner Andrade, thank you for that question.
I was wondering that myself. I wanted to ask Peter, was there any noticing done
Yes.
for this? Okay.
And so if we continue to not to a specific date, we'd have to renote.
That's my point. We would be able to do that if we re-noticed. If the commission's not comfortable with that, you could continue it out to a future date, and then we could continue it again if necessary, with, perhaps the applicant's agreement, if you're more comfortable doing it. That's another acceptable way.
Okay, we have a motion.
But there's a question about the date and whether or not we're going to put a date on that.
Would like to put a date on that?
My preference would be not to. And the applicant is okay with that? So we would renotice?
Okay.
I just have a difficulty continuing something to somewhere in the future. And so if you're going to remove it from the calendar, then I think that would be appropriate. So it'd be like no action taken, right?
My
Commissioner
motion is
Gotti.
still on the table.
Yes, I know. I wanted to just address that, Commissioner Dickerson. That's another option I should have given you, that if it's going to be re-noticed, as long as staff's willing to not make them file a new application and charge new fees, that would be another option, just to take it off the commissioner's calendar altogether, and then if it's going to be re-noticed for a hearing.
Okay. Applicant has something to say?
Commissioner Dickerson, thank you. I apologize for interrupting. It occurs to me that we have a federal shot clock to abide by here, the applicant and staff, and need to act within certain parameters. And my experience with Verizon's legal counsel is that they are actually more comfortable with a certain date when there's continuances. So, and they're actually not very comfortable at all with open-ended, because I'm going to get on the phone with them tomorrow, and they're going to say, well, when do we extend the shot clock to? It's called a tolling agreement between the parties. We agree that the city needs more time. We have to have an end date, so I would suggest a date that's somewhere in the 90 to 120 days out from today. That should give us enough time.
Peter?
So recommend the first meeting in November?
November 4th?
Commissioner Dickerson and the staff, we probably need more time than November, something 90 to 120 days out. So you're into January, February time.
So recommend January then, and see how we are at that point.
I would suggest we pick a date in January.
Yeah.
That's on your agenda, that's on your available meeting dates now.
You're just going to change your motion then?
January 6th. Is the first one.
The first meeting in January is the 6th. The next one would be 20th. 6th?
Can we do it for the 20th? I'm not going to be here on the 6th.
Yeah, I suggest the 20th as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, can we have a modified?
I would like to amend my motion to include the date of January 20th, 2016.
Okay.
Can I
And we
get a
have
second?
we have second. Okay, can I get a roll call on that, please?
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Andrade,
No.
Commissioner Quigley,
Aye.
Chair Dickerson.
Aye. I would just like to say, between now and then, one of the things I would like to see as part of this is, obviously, we've discussed the tower and how emergency services, first responders are being communicated with, to see whether or not the Verizon tower really makes a difference any longer, given what the police are doing. Okay. And also, maybe we could also look into the various technologies. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 5, zoning ordinance text amendment for freeway tower signs and a freeway tower sign overlay district near the intersection of 101 and Broadway. And we will hear from staff excitedly.
Before we go into the formal presentation, there are two zoning actions being proposed. One is to amend the text of the zoning ordinance, and then the other is to apply an overlay district to an area of land in the city. So that's why there's two resos, and as this moves on to council, there would be the ordinance for the text and then the ordinance for the map. So I just want to give that explanation as to the paperwork that you have.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening. Yes, the last item here is a zoning text amendment and zone change. And I'd like to just go and start the discussion this evening with our existing regulations, just so everybody can understand. Currently, the zoning ordinance allows for freeway interchange towers along US Highway 101 at Broadway, Donovan, Main, Stoll, and Betaravia Road. 2 towers are allowed per interchange, and the maximum height is 75 feet. So right now, as the ordinance stands, there's a limit of just 2 per interchange. There are 2 existing sign towers. I think we've all seen them from the highway. I don't have a pointer, but the top right is the Crossroads Shopping Center. The bottom right is the Gateway Business Plaza. And so also there's a 3rd tower that many of you may remember approving for the Freeway Center. That's approved, but it hasn't been constructed yet. So we'll expect to see a 3rd tower in the city of Santa Maria soon. The sign ordinance limits the placement of signage on freeway towers. This limitation only allows businesses to place signage on a tower only if the business is located on the same site as the tower. So I'd like to focus your attention on the left, and that slide shows the Gateway Business Plaza and their tower. They have a sign tower along US 101. Today, under the existing ordinance, that site, those 2 buildings are the only buildings that can advertise, meaning put a sign on that tower. So it's very, very limited. That's one of the reasons why the item is before you this evening. The owner of the Gateway Tower, which is here tonight, Mr. Julius Karstens, filed an application to amend the zoning ordinance in order to expand his signage capabilities on the Gateway Tower. Staff is proposing a text amendment and a zoning map amendment for freeway tower signs that will create a new overlay for allowable locations for existing and new freeway tower signs in Santa Maria. So just a quick summary for you. It's in your staff report, but a quick summary is under this new method or new technique of an overlay district, you would be allowed just 1 tower per overlay district. Secondly, the establishment of each overlay district defines which businesses are considered on-site and can locate signage on the tower. And lastly, each tower will require its own overlay district. So unless you're in an overlay, you cannot have a tower. At this time, only 1 freeway tower overlay district is proposed, and that is for the Gateway Business Plaza. This is because Mr. Karstens applied for an amendment, and he also owns the Gateway Tower. I just wanted to also talk real quickly about this slide. The proposed overlay for you to this evening shows a variety of properties that would actually be allowed to utilize and put a sign on that tower at the Gateway Business Plaza. For example, there's several hotels in that area. There's Farm Supply, and there's a couple vacant parcels, one of which has a hotel that's planned for the near future. In the future, just wanted to kind of close with a couple things. In the future, staff will come back with future overlays. For example, the Crossroads Center and the Freeway Center, which I mentioned already has towers, so we will come back and add an overlay for there. In addition, the Enos Ranchos specific plan area and the project that's being planned, master plan for that area, will also desire an overlay because they want to have a tower. Other than that, that concludes the discussion this evening for this proposed amendment and overlay. If there's any questions, staff's available to answer any questions, but also there's 2 resolutions before you, as Peter explained, because there's 2 separate actions. The text amendment and then an actual overlay, which is its own separate zoning district. That concludes the presentation.
All right. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions of staff? We have an applicant in this, don't we? I mean, yes, sir. Why don't we hear from you?
Hi, I'm Julius Karstens. I'm the one who initiated this with the city.
And I'm sorry, sir, your address?
I live in Atascadero, California, 8200 San Diego Road.
Okay, thank you very much.
My name's Julius Karstens. I started this process with the city over a year ago. And the original idea, because I drive in from the north every day, was to get a sign tower up there that better represented that area of town. I think the north end of town has no representation of what's been developed and what's coming in the future. And I just thought, well, how can we do this? So I started talking to the city a long time ago. And then Brian's been working on this really well and came up with this overlay plan, and I think it's a good idea in how it's going to capture the businesses that don't really have any freeway visual, and also shows people who drive by it daily that there are other things on the north end of Santa Maria, and people who might just be coming and going from the valley especially. Originally also the sign tower was going to have the Gateway Plaza top removed and a Welcome to Santa Maria logo put on it. That's kind of been not on any of this stuff, but I just wanted to let you guys know that that was the intent and still is my intent. I'm really looking forward to creating a tower that is very clean and represents in a very clean way the businesses on that end of town. That's the idea here, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant? No? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any written communications? Any public? Okay. I'll bring that back to the commission then at this point. And are there any further questions of staff by the commissioners or comments? No? All right. We have two resolutions, so does anybody want to make a resolution motion?
I can do it. That the Planning Commission by resolution recommends City Council approve Z 2015-0001 text amendments to the zoning ordinance for freeway towers and
Stop. You got to do one at a time.
2665.
2665,
Yes,
number 2665.
correct.
Okay. We have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. You got to get a roll call, please.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Andrade.
Aye.
Commissioner Quigley.
Aye.
Chair Dickerson.
Aye. Go ahead.
That the Planning Commission by resolution recommend the City Council approve Z 2015-0003, an amendment to the zoning map to establish a planned development freeway tower overlay district on 24.3 acres near Broadway and US 101 with number 2666.
I'll second.
Okay. Can I get a roll call?
Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Quigley.
Aye.
Commissioner Andrade.
Aye.
Chair Dickerson.
Aye. Wonderful. All passed. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to other business. The first on that, item number 6, discussion of study session scheduling requested by Commissioner Brown. Shouldn't it be Brown?
I apologize, that's
There we go.
Commissioner Brown. Roger Brown.
I was wondering who Rogers was.
Commissioner Roger, because we're very informal around here. Who wants to start, staff, or you wanted to bring it up?
Well, I know we all have our own reasons and so forth, but I've been on the planning commission now for 18 years. And I can remember when I was still working, I got off work and came into the meetings that happened during the daytime and so forth. And we had Wednesday night meetings and Thursday study sessions. And they all started at 10 o'clock in the morning, which actually worked out pretty well, because they probably gave you the whole afternoon to go back to work or whatever it was, and it didn't chop up the day as much as it does now, having it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock in the afternoon, excuse me. And I just really liked the 10 o'clock in the morning meeting better, and I would hope we could go back and stick with it.
I think this comes from us having moved it. Obviously, we moved it from the 10 or 10:30 time period. It was kind of a compromise, moving it to 1 o'clock. The reason that we need to move it was because staff was not able to, neither Peter nor Larry were able to attend a morning session anymore. So we went in kind of a temporary mode. I envision down in the future, perhaps when things loosen up, we can move things around, but at this stage, we didn't want to do it at night. None of us wanted to do it at night, and we couldn't, because of staff, do it in the morning, so 1 o'clock was kind of was the alternative that we all grudgingly accepted. I don't know. Do other people have comments on that? Yeah.
What does staff think about, is there a possibility in the near future that they might be able to go back to that time?
By near future, in my mind, I would think like in the next year. And I would say I'm very doubtful that we're going to be available for that. But possibly further down as we have retirements and those spots are filled and such, we may be at the point where there will be the availability back at that time. And right now, the issue is there's a beginning of the first Thursday of every month, there's a morning meeting in Slovang where the basically all of the planners of Solvang, sorry to the television audience too, where the managers or directors of planning departments of the county, as well as the public works managers and directors, have meetings to talk about regional issues. And in particular, there was a planner who specialized in that, who is moving towards retirement, and we don't have someone who can step in and take his place other than a manager at this point. So over time, we may get that person, and then we may be able to go back to 10. But at this time, it's not possible.
Nobody else has any comments?
Any other comments from other commissioners?
Just doesn't matter to me.
You're available at all hours, 24/7. 3 a.m. study sessions.
Well, it just really chops up the day. You know, it ties up the whole day when we do that.
Well, that ties up the whole day for all of us. I mean, 10 o'clock is probably worse for me than 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock breaks up the day as well, but I'm willing to compromise at 1. I think 10 o'clock is not. It really doesn't work. I mean, I remember, I haven't been on the commission as long as Commissioner Brown. I think about 13 years. And there were times when I just couldn't attend because it was at 10 o'clock, but 1 o'clock is usually, courts are still out of session, and I know it's getting, I don't know if when you're talking about retirement, were you talking about me or not? But given my situation, that's not likely within the next 10 years or so.
Good
So
to know. Good to know.
at that point, if I'm retired, I'll come back at 10.
Yeah.
Any further comments?
I mean, in the future, I think there is room for flexibility. I think the staff schedule changes, but right now, there isn't.
Does the study session have to be on Thursdays?
There's no requirement for the day or time. It's just we want a time that the commission's available and that staff's available.
And maybe that's something we can look at towards the beginning of next year or something, if there's a different day or different flexibilities. And of course, further down the road, if there's more openings, then we could talk about that. But, you know, it's just, as always, schedules are sticky wickets because, you know, what works for one person doesn't work for another, you know, and so there we go. But it seems like, as it stands right now, we have to kind of stick to 1 o'clock on Thursday and ride it out and see where we're at. It seems to me we are doing special sessions. They're all special sessions. Does staff or legal want to weigh in on that at this time?
Thank you, Commissioner Hicks and members of the commission. Yes, we should at some point, if we're going to change the time to 1 o'clock or change the day, we should amend the bylaws. We can bring it as a consent item on a future agenda and make it official so that we don't have to treat them as a special meeting. That'd be my recommendation.
Okay.
And then another point, now is the time when we are starting to plan out and project out what the dates of the hearings are for next year. So if there's interest in talking about the scheduling, you know, now would be the time.
Okay. Is that something you'd want to do in a study session, probably?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. So maybe sometime in the next few study sessions, you want to put that on, and we can discuss that. And then once we come to a consensus on that, then you can start going down the road of the bylaws for something enacted this year for next year, that sort of thing. Okay. You good?
Yeah.
All right. 7, report on city council actions. I hope there's tons of reports for Sam's. I just want to be here all night.
I unfortunately don't have any information because I did have a chance to speak to the director who attended the meeting.
I see. We have any other staff that would
Well,
like to discuss
I can
it?
advise you that the project that was before the city council, what was it, Peter, the senior housing project, it did pass, but that's all I know.
Okay.
It's just the authorization to apply.
Got it. How about oral reports from planning commissioners and staff?
Yeah, today is my birthday, and I was hoping I would get it changed to 10 o'clock as a birthday present.
Happy
Your birthday at 10 o'clock? Well, all right. Now, why didn't staff tell us that it was Roger's birthday? For God's sakes. He may have made it up.
No, it's true, it's true.
It's real.
You know what? I'll get you a new knee. How about Monday?
I'm getting it one Monday.
Oh, you're already getting one. Somebody's already got you that, so
Yeah.
I'll have to get you something else.
6 o'clock Monday morning in Santa Barbara.
Any other oral reports from planning commissioners? No, and staff? No? With none, I adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.